Hi, and welcome to this live reading from How Could I Forget from the Plentiful in Love series, Book 1 by N.D. Jackson, and this is presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Prologue. 5 years ago. Fuck yeah, suck it down, baby. Tyler Henderson knew how to make just about anything sound dirty, but Danny just ignored him and focused on tackling the plastic contraption holding about 100 ounces of cheap beer. He took a deep breath, eyeing the giant red funnel being held by two eager pledges on either side, waiting for their cue to pour. The two long, yellowish plastic tube attached to the funnel looked overwhelming, but he pulled it to his mouth and wrapped his lips around it anyway. I don't know what the hell I was thinking, he mumbled, before nodding his cue to the pledge who tipped the beer into the funnel. He sucked the beer down fast. Too fast, as it turned out. Danny spluttered, spitting out nearly as much beer as he took in, and stepped away from the offending beer bong. You just have to open up your throat. Like this. That voice sounded familiar with its husky, honey tone. Danny was sure he knew the owner, and unless he was drunker than he thought, he knew from which class, too. Turning around, he was struck by a somewhat familiar pair of sparkling blue eyes, succulent pink lips curved into a bright smile, and a cascade of waves in nearly every shade of red on the spectrum. Here, let me show you. She slid around him and grabbed the tube with one hand, gesturing the slope of her throat with the other. Watch my throat. I'm going to relax it so it opens up and the beer goes right down. Something you know all about, right, Kayla? Tyler thought he was so damn funny, but really he was just an asshole, and Danny rolled his eyes in disgust, catching a flash of hurt in her gold-flecked eyes. Kayla never let her hurt show, and he respected her even more for that. Crossing his arms and puffing out his chest, Danny looked at Kayla and flashed a smile of encouragement. Show me. He stood back, watching in awe as she flashed a wink and a smile at the unsuspecting pledges. They looked as powerless as I felt when she unleashed that smile. Danny peeked over her shoulder, and his breath caught when she turned her smile up to full wattage and aimed it right at him. Grabbing the tube with both hands, she yelled, "Fire it up, boys!" and emptied the beer bong in less than 15 seconds if his estimates were accurate. She licked at her plump lips to clear away the foam before she turned around with a big smile just for Danny. See? No spillage and no sucking. She held out the tube to him. Ready to give it another go? Her smirk was a challenge, and he'd give anything to get another one of those million-watt smiles. Regretting his answer before it even left his mouth, Danny grabbed the tube with one hand and playfully bumped her hip. Sure, why not? I can't look like a bigger idiot. Sure you can, she chuckled softly. They could have used the tube shaped like a 3-foot dong. Danny threw his head back and laughed harder than he had all semester at the image that formed in his head. You're right. Hand it over. Kayla. Huh? Hand it over. Kayla. That's me. She pointed to herself, drawing attention to the cleavage peeking above her tiny pink and white tank top. The same cleavage he'd spent the last 10 minutes trying to ignore. I know who you are. His smile dimmed considerably. We've had 5 classes together this year, 3 last semester and 2 this semester, not to mention all the time you spend here. He spread his right arm around, gesturing to the frat house he'd joined because his father insisted he would make connections for the future. Kayla's fiery gaze turned ice-cold in seconds. Her body stiffened, and the bright smile disappeared behind a brief flicker of hurt before transforming into a mask of indifference. Right, she muttered before turning and walking away without a glance back at him. Damn it, what the hell is wrong with you? But he knew what was wrong. He spent 3 hours every Tuesday and Thursday inhaling her flowery scent and trying to pry his gaze away from her and onto the professor he hoped to wow with his financial prowess. He couldn't help but notice those never-ending legs, that glossy hair framing her gorgeous face, and the deep, throaty laugh she let loose freely. But it seemed Kayla had no problem keeping her focus off him. Until tonight, dumbass. She was talking to you, smiling at you, and maybe even flirting with you, but your bruised ego had to go and hurt her feelings. Danny knew he should apologize, would apologize, in fact, as soon as he fortified himself with 100 ounces of cheap beer floating down a filthy beer bong. After sucking down nearly every ounce, minus a few that dribbled down his chin and stained his shirt, Danny went in search of Kayla. He looked into each and every room on his left and right, seeing drunken revelers making out, playing quarters, and doing body shots in celebration of tomorrow's graduation ceremonies. What he didn't see was Kayla, so he headed outside and found her curled into a recliner in the shadows of the colonial revival he called home for the past 2 years. Her auburn waves shimmered in the moonlight around her face, only the burning tip of her cigarette visible from where he stood. She stared into the distance, looking sadder and more alone than he had ever seen her. As much as Danny wanted to go to her and wrap her in the strength of his arms, knowing he was likely to blame for her melancholy, he took a moment to soak in her beauty. She was the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen, in real life, movies, or magazines, and this would probably be the last time he would ever see her. He made his way over to Kayla, cautiously, as she lit a new cigarette with the old one. "Those things will kill you, you know." She flicked a cold stare his way, inhaling nearly half the cigarette in one breath before refocusing her gaze on some distant point beyond him. Hugging her long legs with her free hand, she looked vulnerable, but she used the gesture to create a barrier between her and the world. Danny wasn't smart enough to heed the warning. "Kayla, I'm sorry, okay? I didn't mean it like that. Of course She held her hand up to stop his empty words. "It's fine, Danny. Don't worry about it. I get it." She almost sighed the last words and sought solace in the nicotine between her long, delicate fingers. Raking strong fingers through his hair, Danny sighed in frustration. "All I meant was, of course, I know who you are, Kayla. We have tons of classes together. Not that you'd notice." He murmured the last part, wishing he had the strength to leave those words unsaid. But they got her attention. Kayla flicked her finished cigarette in his direction and mocked him. "Oh, I'm so sorry, Danny. Your precious male ego is bruised because I paid attention to the professor. You know, the one actually teaching the class. Not all of us can be finance prodigies, okay? But whatever. Apology accepted." She stood and stomped out the burning tip of her cigarette before turning and walking away. But not before Danny grabbed her wrist, feeling the pulse increase to a rapid gallop. She didn't even look back at him. "What?" I don't know. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry, and—" "Danny boy, there you are!" Tyler's voice echoed loudly in the dark corner of the porch. "And I see you already met Kayla. Perfect!" Confusion settled on his face as he looked from Tyler to Kayla. "What do you need, Ty?" Tyler laughed, throwing one well-muscled arm over Danny's shoulder. "I'm all good, bro, but you need to get laid tonight, man, and Kayla is just the girl for the job." The smarmy smile he flung at Kayla made Danny want to puke and kill him all at the same time. Dan looked to Kayla, and his stomach bottomed out as understanding dawned across her face. "I don't think that's necessary, Ty." Tyler laughed. "Don't worry, Danny. No one is better for your first time than Kayla. She'll be gentle, teach you a few tricks, and leave you well satisfied before the sun comes up. Won't you, Kayla?" Ty laughed again, this time clapping Dan on the back with a too loud laugh. "Have fun, kids." The look she hit him with was cold enough to stop lesser men, and at the moment Danny was sure there were none lower than him. "Sure," she shrugged. "That's why you came out here, isn't it?" Before Danny could form a response, Kayla was walking back into the house. Stupid, stupid, stupid. Kayla berated herself as she trudged the familiar path up the sticky stairs of the frat house, making her way to the second-story bedrooms. She should have known that Danny was just like all the rest of the guys she knew. Sure, he was kind and geeky and clumsy and even pretty hot underneath those ill-fitting jeans and 2 small science t-shirts that made his jokes out of the periodic chart and math theorems. But despite all of that, she thought, angrily hitting the wall on her way up, he was no different. And, damn, did she feel stupid introducing herself as if he didn't know who she was. He knew. And he'd apologized. She tried to remind herself, but that didn't help her inner rage. Really, though, it was her own stupid fault for thinking any of them would be different. They never were. And Danny had only apologized so he wouldn't miss out. That inner cynic reminded her. Yeah, that. What the hell? He can be my last hurrah before I get the hell out of here. Once and for all. As much as she hated being this way, Kayla refused to deny she was this way. She liked boys, and she liked sex, and she had no problem indulging in both as much as possible. But sometimes she felt so used. After the gratifying high of an orgasm or two faded, she didn't like herself very much. Maybe Mom is right, and I am just a pretty face too liberal with her affections. She could practically hear her mother's disapproving voice. I'd hardly call it affection, Mom. That thought produced a slight upturn of her plump lips. Her mother never appreciated the answer, which only made Kayla love it more. At the top of the stairs, Kayla turned right and kept going until she spotted the door with a giant Rubik's Cube hanging from it. It read, "Damn the man," and she laughed bitterly before pushing the door open and closing it softly behind her. Scanning the room, Kayla was surprised to find the room neat and tidy, except a few thick textbooks and a laptop on a desk in the corner scattered with graded papers. She was surprised to find just one bed in the room since all the other guys bunked to a room. It was probably because his GPA allowed the frat to stay active on campus. But whatever the reason, she was grateful tonight. Kayla was in no mood to put on a show this evening. Tomorrow would be a long day with her attending the fashion department graduation in the morning and the finance ceremony in the early evening, and she would be doing it all alone. Her parents weren't coming because they thought a fashion and design degree a waste of money, and her twin sister Kylie had graduated a year early and was knee-deep in medical school. She just wanted to get this over with so she could go home and get some sleep. It was such a shame since she'd come here for Danny tonight anyway. Looking at his room, she could see why she thought he'd be different. There were posters on the walls of Einstein, Pink Floyd, and Malcolm X showing his eccentric taste. Same guy, different packaging, she muttered to the empty room. She removed her layered tank tops and threw them on the comforter adorned with graphics of the old video game Asteroid. Toeing off her shoes, she pulled a mini bottle of tequila from her purse and sucked it down in one gulp, tossing the purse onto the growing pile on his desk. Next to the desk was a bookshelf almost too large for the room. 5 shelves high and overflowing with books ranging from stock market analysis to science fiction and tech magazines and crime thrillers. Too bad he really is like all the rest when we have so much in common. I could have really liked him. Running a finger wistfully through the dust lining one of the shelves, Kayla wished things were different. But they aren't, the cynical voice in her head reminded her. You are who you are. No sense in trying to change. No sense in trying to change it now. And wasn't that the biggest problem of all? Shaking off those depressing thoughts, Kayla twirled around and plopped down right on top of Asteroid. She knew he'd be coming in any minute. Oh, sure, he waited longer than most guys, probably trying to quiet his conscience, but he wouldn't be able to resist what was offered or given so freely. She grabbed another bottle from her purse, thanked her roommate and his flight attendant boyfriend for the mini bottles, and waited. And waited. And waited. The sound of the door opening ripped Kayla from her thoughts, and she stood to face the door. Her emotions were firmer in check, revealing nothing of her inner turmoil. To Danny, she probably looked bored. Danny closed the door with a soft click, leaning on it for support as his gaze raked over her. She felt the heat and weight of it, like it was a living, breathing thing as he took in the hot pink lace covering her boobs all the way down to her glittery pink toes. Hi. Hi, she replied, ignoring how his awkwardness made her stomach twist. Look, Kayla, I'm sorry about before. She held up her hand to cut him off as she stood and closed the distance between them. Don't worry about it, Dan, I'm here. She took a step closer to him. You're here. She unfastened the buttons on her jeans, offering him a peek of matching pink underwear. You're getting what you want. She came closer until they stood chest to chest. And so am I. Applying the slightest pressure, Kayla leaned into Danny, leaving him caught between the hard door and her soft curves. Danny's breath quickened and his face reddened. What you want? Kayla nodded and leaned in to nibble on his left earlobe. I've always thought you were cute, Danny. I may be easy, but I sleep with who I want, when I want. Me? Really? His tone was incredulous, and she would have grinned if she hadn't bitten down on her cheek to stop that nonsense. Pushing off the door, Kayla took several steps away and kept her back to him. Yes, really. She sounded exasperated and annoyed that he didn't get it even to herself. Advanced finance principles, financial planning for alternative businesses, and corporate finance. She recited the classes they shared the previous semester. But, Danny, we've had classes together for years, but we have never been introduced. The truth was he barely said a word to her, no matter how many openings she'd given him. He raked a hand through his already messy hair and blew out a frustrated breath. Shit, Kayla, I'm sorry. I just assumed, you're so gorgeous and you never said anything to me. I don't know. I guess I thought... Man. Gorgeous? She felt her skin heat as a blush worked its way up her body. Slowly she turned until she was looking at Danny's forlorn expression. Poor guy was so flustered, and he was still trying to find the words. Always with the words. Danny. That not only shut him up, but had him blinking uncontrollably. Yeah? She curled one sparkly pink-tipped finger to summon him closer, and he obliged without protest. When he was close enough to feel her warm tequila-scented breath, Kayla wrapped first one arm, then the other around his neck. Kiss me.